The email came in at exactly 2:31 a.m. I was seated in business class, somewhere above the pitch-black sky of the Atlantic Ocean. The cabin lights had just dimmed. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee left over from dinner, and outside the window, Sao Paulo's skyline had disappeared behind layers of clouds. Only darkness stretched out endlessly now. I had just completed one of the biggest deals Nexera Technologies had ever secured. 3 global telecom giants, a $1.5 billion partnership over 7 years, all unified under a new cloud integration plan. I'd flown from Tokyo to London, then to Sao Paulo to seal every detail. And just when I thought I'd finally earned a moment to breathe after 10 grueling months, my phone buzzed. I picked it up instinctively. The subject line made my chest tighten. Termination notice, effective immediately. I read it 3 times, hoping I was hallucinating from exhaustion. But no, every word was perfectly clear. Ethan Cole, your employment with Nexera Technologies is hereby terminated, effective immediately. All access credentials have been revoked. Please refrain from engaging with any clients or internal systems. This is a final decision. No phone call. No thank you. No explanation. Just a quiet knife, delivered midair in the dead of night. And the sender? Logan Rains, CEO, the same man who'd clapped me on the shoulder 2 weeks ago and said, "You're the only one I trust to get this done." I looked around the cabin. Everyone was asleep under plush blankets and our masks, their mouths slack from too much wine. And I just sat there, hollowed out, with no gravity, no identity. I had just secured a historic deal, and I was fired at 35,000 feet like I'd never existed. But I didn't lose control. I didn't panic. I leaned down quietly and pulled out a second laptop from beneath the seat, a matte black machine, no logos, never connected to Nexera systems. I powered on. The screen lit up, and a logo appeared. Archeon. A project I had begun 6 months earlier in secret, known only to me and 2 trusted former colleagues. I didn't build Archeon to betray Nexera. I built it because, deep down, I knew the day would come when my loyalty would no longer be respected. I didn't walk away from Nexera. They walked away from me long ago. I had just refused to see it. Until now. They thought they could erase me with an email. Wrong. I still carried the one thing they couldn't revoke. The trust of the 3 most valuable clients we'd ever had. They didn't sign with Nexera because of the logo. They signed because of me. And now, I didn't belong to Nexera anymore. I'm Ethan Cole, and I'm about to become the name this industry can't stop talking about. I stared at the glowing Archeon logo for a long time. Not because I doubted what I was about to do, but because, in that moment, everything I had planned in secret was no longer hypothetical. It was here, real, activated by the same betrayal that was supposed to break me. The plane shook lightly as we crossed turbulence. I didn't even flinch. My fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up encrypted folders, secured notes, archived call recordings, everything I had built in parallel while working for Nexera. Every legal clause, every client objection, every custom spec. All of it documented. All of it mine. They thought they had cut me off from the Trident deal. What they didn't know was, I was the deal. The clients, Telnova in Tokyo, Eurocom in London, and Brazilink in Sao Paulo, hadn't signed because of Nexera's logo. They signed because I sat across from them for months, answered questions before they were asked, navigated politics, and rewrote every broken part of the system to fit their needs. And they trusted me. Not just because I knew the numbers, but because I listened. I built this from the ground up with real intent, not boardroom buzzwords. It started 6 months ago. I was sitting in a stuffy internal review meeting when I first realized how expendable I'd become. Promotions were being handed out like candy. Safe people, loyal to the right egos. I had been bypassed 3 times. No explanation, just silence and deflection. Then came the moment that finally broke my illusion. A junior executive, Logan's nephew, freshly hired with 0 field experience, was assigned to co-lead a pilot project I had already developed solo. When I objected, they called it collaboration. When I pushed for clarification, I was labeled territorial. That's when I started Archeon. No social media accounts. No flashy pitch deck. Just a name, a purpose, and a growing list of people who felt the same burn I did. Engineers who got replaced by cheaper contractors. Analysts whose reports were published without credit. People like me, sharp, overlooked, and done waiting. I didn't know how long I had before they turned on me completely, but I knew I had to be ready. So I was. 3 days before this flight, I finalized the contingency contracts with Archeon's legal lead, Jenna Leon. She used to be Nexera's head of compliance before politics shoved her out. Now she was mine. We built everything off-grid, encrypted servers, custom dashboards, legally sound frameworks that mirrored every term I had spent 10 months negotiating for Nexera. But better. More agile. More transparent. More human. Even the name Archeon came from an idea we shared late one night over takeout. What if a company didn't just serve clients, but serve the people who built it? What if strategy wasn't a weapon, but a bridge? That's what we were building. And now, thanks to Logan, I was free to go all in. I opened the internal Archeon CRM. One tab blinked, client interest inbound. 3 names were already on the list. Luis Mata, CEO of Brazil Inc. Linda Clark, General Counsel of Eurocom. Yuki Asano, CTO of Telnova. I hadn't even sent a message yet. They had messaged me first. It had started days before the flight. Small questions asked quietly. Ethan, what happens if Nexera changes leadership? Is there a model where we work with your team directly? Are you bound by exclusivity? I had deflected, careful not to breach contract. But now, I wasn't bound by anything. Nexera had severed that time of day, cold, clinical, and irreversible. I clicked draft new message. Tamata, Clark Asano. Subject, a more direct path. Body, there's another way forward. I'll explain soon. I hit send. Then I sat back, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer clarity of it all. Everything was aligning. Every insult, every betrayal, every ignored idea, it had all led to this. I stared down the aisle. The same cabin that had made me feel invisible was now the quiet witness to my rebirth. That's when I remembered something Luis Mata said to me during our last dinner in Sao Paulo. It was just the two of us, drinks in hand, the deal nearly done. You don't speak like an employee, Ethan, he'd said. You speak like someone who built something. So why aren't you running the company? I had laughed it off then. But now, the answer was obvious. Because I wasn't meant to lead their company. I was meant to build my own. And I had. By the time we landed at JFK, I had already received 3 replies. Each one short. Each one simple. I'm listening. Let's talk. Send the plan. That's all I needed. Nexera thought they had erased me. What they really did was release me. I landed in New York at 6:05 a.m., but I didn't head home. Instead, I checked into an old business hotel downtown, one I used to crash in between red eyes when Nexera still treated me like their golden asset. The doorman recognized me. Rough trip? He asked. I just smiled. If only he knew. Inside the room, I dropped my bag, drew the blackout curtains, and powered up the black Archeon laptop again. 3 unread messages blinked on screen. The first was from Luis Mata. He wanted a private video call off record. The second, Linda Clark. She'd already forwarded the Eurocom compliance blueprint, saying, let's see how you do this without a board dragging your feet. But it was the third message that made me pause. It was from someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. Daniel Ruiz, my former operations partner. The guy who sat beside me through a dozen product launches, defended me in tense meetings, and once told me, you're the future of this place. I trusted him. Hell, I'd vouched for him more times than I could count. Subject line, I'm sorry. I opened it. Ethan, I didn't know they'd go this far. They promised me a spot on the global integration team, said it was yours, but that you were being restructured. I thought it was just politics. I didn't know they'd fire you midair. I've already signed the NDA. They said Archeon was a liability. They're watching your IP, trying to get ahead of any press. Please be careful. They're not done. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen. The betrayal didn't surprise me. The apology did. It wasn't personal. It was strategic. That's the part that stung the most. Ruiz had always played it safe. But I never thought he'd sell out everything we'd built just for a title. Now he was part of the machine that was trying to erase me. I closed the email. Not with anger. With clarity. One more reminder. I couldn't go back. And I wouldn't. Just as I was about to switch tabs, another message came through, this time flagged as external. The sender, Iris Vaughn, CEO of StraightAscend. That stopped me cold. StraightAscend was Nextra's biggest competitor in the enterprise cloud space. Aggressive, well-funded, and according to rumors, actively circling the Trident clients for months. We'd always kept our distance. But now they were reaching out. I opened the message. Ethan, you move quietly, but your signature is unmistakable. 3 clients pivoting in unison is not coincidence. If you're building something I want in, StraightAscend is prepared to offer acquisition, infrastructure support, or full strategic backing on your terms. Let's not waste time. Iris. I froze. This wasn't a compliment. It was a calculated move. She smelled blood and opportunity. Part of me wanted to delete it on the spot. I'd just broken free from one power structure. I wasn't about to walk into another. But the other part of me, the strategist, the builder, couldn't ignore what this meant. I had leverage, not just against Nextra, but in the entire industry. They weren't just trying to fire me. Now they wanted to buy me. But I didn't build Archeon to sell. I built it to correct. Still, I replied, Iris, not for sale, but I'm open to a different kind of partnership. One where the builders stay in charge. Ethan. I hit send, leaned back, and let the weight of the moment sink in. I had 2 choices now. 1, keep building quietly, gather strength, and let Nextra bleed out slowly. Or 2, go public. Let the world see what happens when the quiet ones stop being silent. I wasn't sure which path I'd choose yet. But one thing was certain. This war had already begun, and I was no longer fighting it alone. The Global Tech Leadership Summit was held in Berlin that year. A luxury hotel ballroom transformed into a sleek, soundproof conference center. Deep navy banners lined the walls. White-gloved servers moved quietly with espresso trays. Outside, industry press buzzed, cameras flashed, and investors hunted for the next breakout. Inside, Nextra was unraveling. I knew because I'd been watching from a distance. They had leaked a teaser to the press. A transformational partnership with Eastern Sphere Cloud, an Eastern European infrastructure firm with questionable uptime and a history of legal red flags. It was desperation painted as momentum. But I wasn't here to expose them. I was here to replace them. Archeon hadn't been publicly announced yet. No LinkedIn posts. No press interviews. Not even a website until last week. But it had something stronger than hype. Results. 3 legacy telecom firms, Telnova, Eurocom, and Brazil Inc., had quietly signed transitional frameworks with Archeon. No press release. No signature ceremony. Just quiet decisions behind closed doors. And now, it was time to step into the light. Room C214, 9 a.m. Nextra had booked it for a closed session with Eastern Sphere's executive team. Logan Rains would be leading the pitch. I knew that because Jenna, now Archeon's chief legal strategist, still had friends embedded in Nextra's compliance department. My timing had to be perfect. I walked into the hallway, dressed in a slate gray blazer, no badge, no entourage, just confidence and truth. Inside the room, Logan was pacing slowly as the projector warmed up. 2 compliance managers sat stiffly at either side of him, clutching polished briefing folders. The Eastern Sphere CEO, a broad-shouldered man named Marek Dvorsky, sat opposite, watching the room like a hawk. I had met Marek once, years ago. He wouldn't remember me yet, but he would. At 9:13 a.m., I stepped in. No announcement, no spectacle, just presence. Heads turned. Logan looked up, and the color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug inside him. Ethan, he said sharply, this is a closed presentation. No, I replied calmly, holding my ground. This is a joint session. Marek raised an eyebrow. Joint. I stepped forward and laid a single folder on the table. Archeon's infrastructure plan. Clean, tested, customized to Eastern Sphere's regional growth targets. Nextra submitted 2 conflicting statements about its global rollout capabilities, I said. Summit organizers requested full transparency from all competitive parties. I'm here to represent the alternative. The room fell into perfect, stunned silence. Merrick flipped open the folder. Logan's voice tightened. "You're not authorized to speak on behalf of—" "I'm not speaking for Nexera," I interrupted. "I'm speaking for Archeon. And unlike Nexera, we don't fire our architects mid-flight." Marek's CTO leaned forward, scanning the diagrams. "These specs are more agile. They're real," I said. "No marketing fluff. No 20-layer decision matrix. Just clean, sovereign-ready deployment with jurisdictional compliance built in." Logan tried to cut back in. "This is sabotage." "No," I said evenly. "This is what happens when trust follows the builder, not the brand." Merrick looked up at me, then at Logan, then back again. "I want both proposals reviewed," he said, "and I want Ethan's positioned as primary." Logan flinched like he'd been hit. I could have left it there. Victory secured. But I hadn't come just to win. I came for dignity, for truth, for every credit I was denied, for every night I spent stitching the company together while they handed praise to others. So I looked Logan in the eye, cold, steady, and said, "One condition." The room froze. "I'll proceed with joint deployment," I continued, "but only if you're not involved." Logan's lips parted. Nothing came out. "I don't work with people who terminate their closers midair and expect them to mentor their replacements." Merrick blinked. Then slowly he nodded. "I respect that." Logan didn't argue. He left the room in silence. Outside, the Berlin sun had started peeking through the tall glass windows. People in the lobby chatted, oblivious to what had just happened in room C214. But inside, something tectonic had shifted. I sat down quietly. Merrick extended his hand again, this time with full clarity. "I see now why they feared you," he said. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That afternoon, I walked out of the summit as the man Nexera thought they had erased. No title, no badge, no press team, just my name, and the deals they thought they owned, now following me into the future. The next morning, the sky over Berlin was gray and cold. One of those days where the clouds looked like they might fold in on the city. I sat by the window of a quiet hotel cafe, sipping black coffee. No team, no cameras, just my laptop and silence. It was 7:45 a.m. when I clicked publish. No press event, no PR firm, no LinkedIn bragging. Just a single, elegant release through Archeon's private media portal. For immediate distribution, Archeon Technologies is proud to announce a strategic partnership with Telnova, Japan, Eurocom, UK, and Brazil Inc., Brazil, delivering integrated cloud solutions across 3 continents. Valued at $1.5 billion over 7 years, the agreement represents a major shift toward agile, sovereign-first cloud architecture. Contact press@archeon.io. Ethan Cole, CEO. That was it. No fireworks. Just fact. By 8:05 a.m., my inbox pinged. 1 email, then 3, then 12. By 9 a.m., Archeon had received over 50 inbound requests from enterprise analysts, tech journalists, boutique VCs, and 3 multinationals asking if we had bandwidth for future integrations. And I hadn't even posted to social media yet. At 9:17 a.m., I got a message from Rahim, our lead systems architect. He was still in Tokyo, but had already seen the ripple effect. "You just broke the silence barrier," he texted. "Our DNS lookup spiked 700% in 12 minutes. Welcome to the storm." I smirked. Across the city, at the Tech Summit's main floor, Nexera's executive suite had just received a press alert titled, "3 global clients walk quietly into Archeon." At 9:42 a.m., Jenna forwarded me a message that had been circulating internally at Nexera. Grayson was demanding an emergency board session. Mallory Hart had gone completely radio silent. Someone in investor relations had suggested framing the loss as strategic decentralization. It was falling apart faster than I expected, but I didn't say anything, because this wasn't noise. This was precision. At 10:06 a.m., TechWatch Global published the headline that would start the fire. "The Quiet Coup. Archeon outmaneuvers Nexera in $1.5 billion shift." By noon, that headline had reached every inbox from Palo Alto to Singapore. Nexera tried to push back, releasing a rushed internal statement claiming that the Trident clients had chosen to explore temporary transitional solutions while Nexera repositions globally. But it was too late. The clients didn't release counterstatements. They didn't need to. Their silence said everything. Because in enterprise, silence isn't absence. It's a verdict. At 2 p.m., I walked out into the Berlin streets. Tourists passed by with cameras. Locals sipped coffee near the U-Bahn. No one knew that a billion-dollar empire was collapsing behind one of the glass towers down the street. And I liked it that way. Raheem called from Tokyo. "You see the Financial Chronicle piece?" "Not yet," I replied, crossing a street. They called it a controlled industry pivot. Said Archeon just became the new template for how enterprise trust is transferred, quietly, without a fight, from institutions to individuals. I stopped walking. That hit deeper than any trophy headline. Not a victory, a template, a new standard. "You did it, man," Raheem said. "No," I replied. "We did it, and we're not done." That night, I checked into the same hotel suite I used to stay in when traveling for Nexera. Everything was the same, the bed, the view, even the minibar snacks. But the silence was different. It wasn't isolation. It was ownership. I opened my laptop again and stared at the homepage Raheem had just finalized. Simple, clean, no buzzwords. Just one line, center screen. What we build belongs to those who build it. There was no Meet Our Founder section. No About page with smiling stock photos. Just the Archeon logo, a secure login, and a gateway built for the future. I sat back and let it wash over me. This time last year, I was invisible, carrying a company that didn't see me. Now, they couldn't look away. I didn't need applause. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted what every builder wants. A place where my work had a name. And this time, that name wasn't buried in someone else's slide deck. It was mine. It started with a voicemail. Just past 7:30 the next morning, as the Berlin skyline yawned into another cold, steel-gray day, my phone buzzed with a message from a blocked number. I already knew who it was before I hit play. Grayson. His voice, usually sharp with confidence, sounded different now, like something inside him had folded. "Ethan, I assume you know by now what's happening. Look, I don't want to get into blame games or legal back and forths. But if you're still open to a conversation, let's talk. There's room for coexistence here. Maybe even integration. Call me." I listened to it once, then deleted it. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. I had spent years waiting for recognition, for a real seat at the table. Now that I had built my own, I had no interest in sharing it with the man who once shoved me off the flight deck midair. Across the Atlantic, the fallout had already begun. By 10:15 a.m., New York time, Nexera's board of directors had convened a special meeting. Not virtual, in person, emergency seating. Jenna, still tapped into their legal intel, texted me from a burner line. "Grayson's on thin ice. 3 directors just pulled out of the Asia-Pac expansion strategy. Mallory hasn't shown up to 2 scheduled calls. Compliance is scrambling to explain client migration without notice. It's unraveling. The same people who once treated me like a brilliant but inconvenient tool were now panicking inside the very system they thought was bulletproof. But I wasn't celebrating. Instead, I walked into Archeon's first temporary HQ, a borrowed office in Kreuzberg with minimal furniture and a clean whiteboard wall, and opened a document titled Reclamation Candidates. It was a list I had quietly built over the past year. Not of vendors or competitors, but people. People Nexera had chewed up and discarded for being too honest, too innovative, too different. I had watched as they were sidelined, laid off, or replaced with nepotism and empty titles. Engineers who challenged inefficient code. Product strategists who refused to inflate numbers. Compliance leads who said no when the room wanted yes. Some of them I had worked beside. Others I had only heard about in passing. But I remembered everyone. And now, I was calling them back. I didn't offer titles or salary ranges in the emails. Just one sentence. What you built was never forgotten. The door is open. Within the hour, replies started rolling in. First cautious, then fast, then eager. By the end of the day, I had 10 onboarding calls lined up, former teammates, ex-contractors, even 2 people I once competed against for internal roles. None of them asked for guarantees. They just wanted to build again, where effort meant ownership, where silence wouldn't erase them. Meanwhile, Nextra bled. At 3:25 p.m., TechWatch Global updated their lead story. Breaking: Grayson Rains removed from Nextra board by unanimous vote. Sources close to the company's site: loss of institutional trust and reputational compromise following client walkouts. There was no press conference, no denial, just a quiet void where his name used to sit on their masthead. Mallory's departure came even quieter, just a single line in the industry dailies. Vice President Mallory Hart resigns from Nextra amid organizational realignment. No farewell post, no thanks, not even a stage photo in front of a branded wall. She was gone, and no one asked where she went. That evening, I stood by the windows of our Berlin space, watching the lights shimmer along the canal. The team was still small, just 8 of us in person, with another 10 scattered across time zones, but the energy in that room was real. No hierarchy, no forced applause, just people working. Raheem sat on a folding chair beside me, laptop on his knees, tweaking the new system dashboard. "You think Nextra will recover?" he asked, not looking up. "They might," I said. "Big ships take a while to sink. But no one's steering anymore. And us." I looked around the room. At Jenna, sketching legal frameworks on the whiteboard. At Clara, former head of user experience, leading a discussion on client-centric onboarding. At Daniel, the DevOps guy who had once been fired for refusing to fake metrics, now coding with his shoes off and music in his ears. I took a breath and answered quietly. "We're not recovering anything. We're just building it right this time." Because this wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. Of voices. Of purpose. Of names that had once been erased from agendas and memos and product launches, now etched into the very structure of what came next. And as I stared out at the city, bright, indifferent, alive, I felt something settle inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not triumph, but wholeness. A week after Nextra fell silent, my inbox exploded. Not with congratulations, not even with gossip, but with capital. Angel investors, private equity scouts, late-stage VC firms. One after another, they came bearing slick decks, warm introductions, and subject lines like, "Let's talk scale. What you've built is rare. Ready to lead the future?" In 48 hours, we had 6 term sheets, none solicited, none encouraged. Some were subtle, others aggressive. One VC even offered to fly out to Berlin with his own legal team and a bottle of single malt he thought would impress me. I ignored the whiskey, but I read every line of every offer. Because while I never intended Archeon to chase funding in its infancy, I also knew this moment wouldn't last forever. Momentum is like oxygen in our world. It evaporates quickly if you don't contain it. So I sat down in our temporary HQ, surrounded by people I respected, and asked the question no startup founder usually dares to say out loud. What if we don't want to grow like them? Silence. Jenna looked up first. "You mean like Nextra?" "No," I said. "I mean anyone. What if we built something designed not to bloat, but to endure?" Raheem turned in his chair. "You want to grow slow? I want to grow clean." Because I had seen what unchecked growth did to ambition. It turned urgency into ego, vision into vanity metrics, innovation into internal warfare, and loyalty, well, that turned into something toxic and one-sided. That was Nextra's disease. And now we had the chance to do something no one expected. Hold the power, but leave the poison behind. That meant no hyperscaling. No investor boards with 3 layers of control. No headcount goals designed just to look good in TechCrunch headlines. We weren't building a unicorn. We were building a foundation. Still, the pressure to say yes was immense. That Friday, I had a video call with the head of a major European tech fund, an articulate, high IQ man named Corwin Strauss, who spoke like he'd already been told by his team that I was different. "We're not looking to change your product, Ethan," he said smoothly. "Your positioning is sound. But if you want to play an enterprise at scale, you'll need infrastructure, headcount, and systems. We can help. And what do you want in return?" I asked. He smiled. "Access. directional input, some visibility on leadership expansion. There it was. Access meant monitoring. Directional input meant steering. Visibility meant eventual replacement. I closed the laptop before he finished his next sentence. Because I knew that song. It always starts soft and ends in silence, your silence. Instead, that evening, I took a train to Hamburg. Not for business. For someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Allie Jensen, one of the best systems designers I'd ever met. We'd interned together a decade ago, then lost touch. Word had reached me that she was now leading a quiet consulting firm helping mid-sized platforms stabilize after burnout. She met me in a park cafe near the river. No pitch deck, no blazer, just a hoodie and blunt honesty. "I don't want another title," she said as soon as I brought up Archeon. "I don't want to sit in meetings full of people pretending they're still passionate." I smiled. "I don't need titles. I need roots." She studied me carefully. "Is that what Archeon is? Or are you just dressing revenge in better clothes?" It hit me like a glass of cold water. Because it was the question I hadn't dared ask myself. Had I really built something new? Or just something opposite? And was I leading out of vision or out of pain? I didn't answer her then. Instead, I invited her to Berlin for 3 days. Not for onboarding, just to observe. She sat in the corner of meetings, joined calls, looked through internal frameworks. And at the end of day 3, she sat across from me and said, "You're close." "To what?" I asked. "To building a system that doesn't need your trauma to survive." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words in my head, not because they were critical, but because they were right. I didn't want Archeon to just be my rebound from betrayal. I wanted it to outlast me. So the next morning, I wrote a new charter. Not a legal document, a cultural one. I called it the ARC principle. 1. We build slow to last long. 2. No one climbs by pushing others down. 3. If you silence one voice, you silence your own. 4. Titles mean nothing without action. 5. When we exit proud. I printed it on a single sheet and pinned it to the wall in our Berlin workspace. No fancy frames. No ceremony. Just a reminder that power isn't evil, but how you use it. That's the difference between legacy and collapse. That afternoon, I accepted just one term sheet. It was from a mid-size impact investor. Quiet, founder-led, run by people who had been builders before they had been funders. They didn't want board seats. They didn't want to own us. They just wanted to support us on our terms. That's all I ever needed. As the sun set over the spree, I stood on the rooftop of the office, hands in my pockets, listening to the quiet murmur of the team below. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was fighting anything. I was shaping something. Something real. Something ours. The invitation arrived in an envelope. No email. No assistant call. Just thick, cream-colored cardstock slipped under my hotel room door one early morning in Zurich. Gold embossed letters at the top. Global Enterprise Summit, Geneva Main Stage. Underneath, in smaller font. Keynote guest invitation. Ethan Cole, founder Archeon. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't expect it, but because it reminded me of every meeting I once wasn't invited to. Every leadership summit I'd watched from the sidelines. Every panel where my ideas had been repackaged by someone else in a sharper suit. And now, the stage was mine. I arrived in Geneva 3 days later. No entourage, no stylist, just a charcoal suit I actually liked wearing and a laptop bag that had flown more miles than most people I knew. The summit buzzed with the usual noise. Panels titled things like Digital Futures and Disruption with Purpose, moderators grinning for cameras, half the crowd networking, the other half pretending not to. But this time, the buzz wasn't about who was speaking. It was about who wasn't. Nextra's press team had gone radio silent for weeks. There were murmurs that their interim CEO had declined to appear, citing strategic restructuring. The last time Grayson was seen publicly, he was being escorted out of his former office. Mallory hadn't posted on social media since the morning she was named VP. They were gone. Not with scandal, with silence, just like they had tried to erase me. And now, I stood in the very spotlight they thought they'd buried me away from. The auditorium was packed. Over 800 seats. Executives, Journalists, founders, clients, eyes sharp with curiosity, some with envy, some with respect, all of them waiting. I stepped up to the podium at 9:01 a.m. No speech notes, no teleprompter, just me. And for a moment, I let the quiet stretch. I wanted them to feel it, the weight of a presence once dismissed. Then I began. I was fired in the sky, I said. A few eyebrows raised. A few phones stopped mid-scroll. I was somewhere over the Atlantic, mid-deal, mid-strategy, mid-sentence, when the email came in. Effective immediately, it said. No thank you. No call. Just erasure. Silence. I had just closed the largest international deal in that company's history. I had spent 10 months across 3 continents building the framework. But in the end, I wasn't let go because I failed. I was let go because I succeeded too loudly. A few heads nodded now. But this isn't a story about betrayal, I continued. It's a story about clarity. About what happens when you stop trying to fit into a room and start building your own. And then I told them the real story. Of Archeon, of the 10 voices I called back into the fold. Of the clients who didn't need a brand. They needed trust. Of the frameworks we built that worked not because they were flashy, but because they were human. I didn't talk about valuation. I didn't list revenue. I didn't use a single buzzword. And when I finished, I didn't ask for applause. But they gave it anyway. Not the hollow clapping I used to hear in boardrooms when people pretended to support an idea they planned to ignore. This was different. It was the sound of people realizing that they just watched someone walk through a door that wasn't open until he built it himself. As I stepped off the stage, a man in his 50s, CEO of a logistics platform I'd admired for years, walked up and shook my hand. Damn good to finally hear a story without spin, he said. That afternoon, the conference hashtag was trending. Not for some new tech launch, not for some metaverse NFT stunt, but for 5 words someone in the crowd had typed and posted. He was the room now. That evening, I sat by the window of my hotel suite, watching the lake shimmer under fading sunlight. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt still, because for the first time in years, I didn't have to convince anyone anymore. They saw it. They felt it. And more importantly, they believed it. The next morning, my calendar was full. Partnership offers, speaking requests, client expansions. But the meeting I was most focused on was with my own team, now over 30 people strong across 7 time zones. Not a single one of them asked for titles. They asked for tools. They didn't want to own. They wanted to contribute. And I realized then that we hadn't just built a company. We'd built a culture of reclamation, where doing the right thing wasn't seen as rebellion, where clarity wasn't punished, where voices didn't have to scream to be heard. The world didn't need another tech empire. It needed a place where builders could breathe. And for the first time in my life, I could finally breathe too. 3 months after the Geneva summit, I received an email with a subject line I hadn't seen in a long time. Request for confidential discussion, Nexera Technologies. No greeting, no sales pitch, just a meeting invite, time-stamped, with an attached name I never thought I'd read again. Evan LeClaire, chairman of the board. The same man who once nodded silently as Grayson Rains took credit for my work. The same man who signed off on my transition without blinking. I didn't respond. Not at first. Instead, I let it sit in my inbox for a day. Then 2. I went on with my work, signing new partners, onboarding clients, mentoring 2 interns who reminded me of younger versions of myself. The Archeon team had grown to 60, spanning 12 cities, and we still didn't have job titles on the office doors. By day 3, curiosity won. I accepted the call, not because I wanted anything from them, but because I needed to hear it. The video feed opened with Evan in what looked like a conference room. He wore a suit a little too formal for the hour, and his face had aged since I'd last seen it. Creased, paler, but still bearing that corporate stiffness I remembered all too well. Ethan, he began, with forced cordiality. Thank you for making time. I'll be brief. I nodded but said nothing. We've weathered a difficult quarter, he continued. The client walkouts, media fallout, board restructuring, it's all had consequences. Our Asia-Pac infrastructure group is in serious jeopardy. We're hemorrhaging contracts. And frankly, the market doesn't trust our leadership anymore. I waited. He leaned forward. We need someone who can stabilize what's left. Someone who understands the backbone, the clients, the architecture. Someone who, well, built it. I finally spoke. You wanted to come back. He flinched just a little. Yes, he said. On your terms. Title of your choosing. Executive control. Full independence. Hell, name your number. He thought this was an offer. A crown being extended to a lost prince. But I didn't come to reclaim a broken throne. I came to leave it empty. I took a slow breath and leaned back in my chair. Evan, I said, do you remember the last time we spoke? His lips pressed together. You told me I was too intense for executive leadership. That clients respected me, but the board preferred someone more flexible. And then you fired me. Midair. You didn't stop it. I corrected. Silence. Let me be clear, I said. I'm not angry. I'm not here to remind you what you lost. You already know. I paused, then delivered the truth I hadn't even realized I'd carried until that moment. But the real reason I'm not coming back is because I finally understand something you never did. What's that? That being invited back doesn't mean power. It just means your house is on fire, and you missed the one who knew how to build it. He looked like he wanted to respond, defend, negotiate. I didn't let him. Evan, I said gently, you don't need me. You need to rebuild from the ashes of your culture. And for that, bringing back what you burned won't help. And then I smiled. Besides, I already have a home. He nodded slowly, realizing the call was already over. Before I closed the laptop, I added one more thing. Next time you meet someone who builds in silence, maybe don't confuse that silence for obedience. The screen went black, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Not triumphant, not righteous, just clear. Later that evening, I walked through the main hallway of Archean's new HQ in Amsterdam. The walls were still unfinished in places. Someone had drawn a quote in permanent marker above the kitchen whiteboard. If they don't give you a seat at the table, build a new table. And leave the door open for those who never got in. I didn't recognize the handwriting. And I didn't need to, because that was the point. This wasn't about my name anymore. It was about the culture we created, one that didn't rely on heroics or corporate rescue missions. One where power was earned, not inherited. Where people who'd once been written off now ran entire verticals. Where the interns were taught how to lead, not how to impress. Before I left for the night, I stood by the glass entryway and watched as two junior team members walked out together, arguing passionately about a UX flow they were building. Their eyes were bright, their voices firm. Neither of them noticed me. Perfect, because this time, I didn't need to be seen. This time, I was the frame they were building within. And that was enough. 5 years later, I found myself in San Francisco, sitting in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe with a chipped ceramic mug of black coffee and a sketch pad I didn't use nearly enough. It was one of those rare mornings when I wasn't in a meeting, on a flight, or troubleshooting someone else's fire. Just stillness, sun slanting through the window, and a quiet confidence in the foundation I'd spent years building. Archean had grown, but not exploded. We stayed lean, global, and stubbornly principled. We never took on more than we could serve. We never let outside voices decide inside strategy. And we never, ever forgot what it felt like to be unheard. I was reviewing a prototype diagram when I felt someone stop a few feet away. Ethan. The voice was familiar but older, softer. I looked up. Mallory Hart. She stood there in a simple navy coat. No entourage, no badge. Just her. Older, calmer. And surprisingly, not trying to pretend, she hadn't once erased my name from my own work. She gestured toward the seat across from me. May I? I nodded once. Of course. She sat down gently, as if the chair remembered more than we did. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said, I saw what you built. Archean, it's something else. I took a sip of my coffee. It is. I'm not here to make peace, she said quickly. Just to say, I understand now. What it cost. What it took. I studied her. She didn't flinch like she used to. There was no corporate mask today. Just a woman who had seen both sides of power and lived long enough to be humbled by it. She pulled out a small notebook. Not a phone. Not a tablet. A real notebook. I've been consulting now, helping early-stage teams avoid what I was part of, That's good, I said. She hesitated, then added, I still think about Tokyo, about Sao Paulo, about what I said, what I didn't say. So do I replied. She looked up sharply, surprised I didn't push blame. But I didn't need to. That part of the road was long behind us. I don't regret what happened, I said after a moment. But I do regret that back then, the only way for me to be seen was to burn the whole thing down. She nodded. We made it impossible for people like you to stay, and for people like me to grow up. Silence again. Then she stood. No apology, no request, just a quiet goodbye. As she walked away, I glanced at the seat she'd left behind. Once I would have fought for that seat, for recognition, for validation, for a place at someone else's table. Now it was just a chair, because the truth is the most powerful seat in any room is the one you no longer need to claim. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or told to stay quiet while others took the credit, this story was for you. Not to stir revenge, but to remind you, you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't need permission to lead, and you don't need their table when you're capable of building your own. If Ethan's journey spoke to something in you, leave a comment below and tell us where you're building from. Like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who's still in the shadows, because maybe they just need a little clarity to begin.